homes and environments shape how we live and how we age. But what happens when our environments become barriers instead of comforts? In this episode, we explore how smart design, simple modifications, and a little creativity can transform any home into a safer, more empowering space for aging in place.
And I am so excited that we get to do this in a conversation with Carol Chiang. She's a globally recognized aging in place expert, occupational therapist, so she gets double points for that, and host of MedBridge's Innovative Aging podcast. And so she is also the founder of Evolving Homes and the author of Age in Place or Find a New Space, which I got right here. And she helps families plan ahead with elegant, stigma-free solutions. And her work is trusted by MIT's Age Lab, Toyota Research Institute, AARP, and UBS. Carol, we are so glad to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, you guys. This is so exciting.
Yeah, this is going to be a really great episode. I also think it's a really great, I know this is Halloween. This is our Halloween episode, but a great episode to listen to going into the holidays because we're about to all be together with our families.
Yes.
Y'all are about to maybe see some things that you wish you had not seen or that you're not sure what to do something about. So this is probably a good episode to kind of get some ideas or some resources to kind of solve those problems going forward. Now, we haven't done this in a little while, but because it is the Halloween episode, I wanted to start with a fun question. Is that okay with y'all?
I'm down.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're all OTs here. We've all done a lot of home modifications. What is the scariest thing you've ever seen doing a home modification in someone's house?
Oh my gosh. Do we have 2 hours? For me, I think the scariest thing I've ever seen is somebody trying to get down into their garage using a big ladder with like one of those step ladders where he was holding onto the step ladder instead of using a stair rail. And, he reasoned that, hey, if it's cold, I don't want to touch this metal. So I'm going to put a towel over it and I'll, lean forward, put all my weight onto it and then, take those really steep steps down. And so I was like, whoa, garage, like concrete garage floor, like slippery towel, dark spaces. Nobody's finding him in the garage if he falls. So that to me was frightening. Absolutely frightening.
Oh man.
Made sense in his mind.
He reasoned all the
It
way
was
through.
scary though for me.
Yeah.
For sure. I think I've seen a lot of scary transfers happen in my day, but the thing that like consistently makes me be like is suction cup grab bars.
Oh,
and so when
dang
I see
it!
those, was that
You
yours?
stole one of mine. Sort of.
One of yours, so you got more to say.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so people make good reasons. They are cost effective. They can go on anything, and when you put those suction cup grab bars up, like they just constantly coming off the wall. And people are like, yeah, I always check it. And they like check it and it's like half on. I'm like, see? Okay, but you're not gonna check it when you're losing your balance, right? Like you need it to be working for you all the time and not have to be like not available. And then the other scary thing about that is on the package it says this does not support your weight. What is a grab bar for except to support your weight? They are telling you up front this does not do what you expect it to do, but please buy it anyway. I can't deal with it.
So Brandy, I got to jump in there for just 2 seconds because I literally have like a section in my book that's like suction grab bars are not the enemy. And you know why? They are a gateway drug. They are like, I'm telling you, what you need is like that suction bar to come off all the time. And they're so inconvenient. They're like, okay, fine. You're right. It does help to get in there. Fine. I don't want to have to deal with that stupid thing all the time. All right.
Go
we
ahead
can
and
put it in.
That's a very much more positive way to look at it. You're right. It can be a gateway drug, but it's scary until it actually turns into a real
It is,
grab bar
yeah,
or
absolutely.
something else to make you secure.
Hopefully it doesn't kill you first. So yeah. No, seriously. I once had a client who was using a suction cup grab bar on their glass shower door, which is a common thing that people do, right? Because you think this can go anywhere. It's a nice smooth surface. But glass shower doors are not meant to hold your weight up either. So neither the suction cup or that door is meant to hold you. And in this particular case, which I had warned against, I said, I don't recommend you do this because if it does hold, there's a good chance that shower door comes down on you. The next week, that's exactly what happened to this person.
Oh my
no.
gosh.
And they ended up...
You have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, they ended up long-term, they were okay. But did they get hurt? Did they go to the hospital? Yeah. And it was totally avoidable. So anyway, real big bummer on that one. But okay, so here's my scary thing. Since Brandy stole mine, I think that one of the other like big, most blanket scary things that I've seen going into other people's homes is actually when someone else who was maybe very well intentioned but did not know really what they were doing for that person has already been in the home and made expensive modifications
Oh my gosh,
that are
yes.
not working for that person. And that's really a sad situation too, because a lot of times at that point, the person has spent their budget for any modifications,
Yep.
which may or may not have necessarily been needed, right? And now they're in a situation where they spent a bunch of money and, you know, the shower or whatever is not accessible for them. And then we have to kind of like backtrack and figure it out. So that's my
Oh
scary
my gosh,
one.
I completely agree with you. I remember going into a shower assessment, and the shower, you know, first of all, I don't love inclines anyway, because you're just outside of like an ergonomic grip that you just don't have the strength in there. But instead of an incline, it was a decline. And I was like, how did that happen? And she told me that, you know, her son reasoned, he had a reason for it. If you fell, then you could do this, or if you want, he had some, you know, functional reason that made sense in his head. But he's not a clinician, and he doesn't know any better. And so he just put it in like that. And so, you know, you can't change things like that. You've already drilled into the tile. I mean, what are you going to do? And now you're basically promoting, you know, bad motions or bad directions, you know, because of where you happen to place those grab bars. Now it's fixed in there. So I completely agree with you.
I had a patient that had just done a whole bunch of remodels, just like you're saying, the scary situation. It was a beautiful looking bathroom. They did a good job, but he had a progressive disease. And so his function changed. And now this shower that it used to be a tub, so now it's a walk-in shower, but it still has a step. He can't step over the step. They put in glass walls and a glass door, and so then that didn't give him the space he needed to like maybe put a tub transfer bench in there so he could, you know, scoot over from his chair over there, because he couldn't step up that step anymore. And so there was just like, it was not nothing we could do. I always feel like there's something we could do, but it's just like sad that like you already spent your budget on doing this. You took the effort to invest in your home, and because we didn't have any like clinician involved, frankly, to like think about the long-term impacts here of what might happen, you didn't quite get it right, and now you're still not able to use the shower. You know, like that is not only scary but sad.
It is. But it's unfortunate. It's just because people don't know to look for us.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I fielded a call yesterday from somebody who had seen me quoted as an expert contributor in the Wall Street Journal. And there's like a remodeling cost calculator in there. And she's a clinician, but not a rehab clinician. And she saw it and she said, oh my gosh, like, I didn't even know people did that. Are there lots of you out there? What's going on around here? Right? Like, people literally have no idea. There is a resource out there that can help them, which I think that is the bigger issue of why OTs need to have podcasts, because to share that message and say, hey, like, we are here to help you do this, because people don't know to look for us if they don't know we exist.
Totally.
Or what we can do.
And I think that's like a good lead in for you to talk about like, why did you write the book? And like, tell us a little bit about like your experience as an occupational therapist and why you felt the book was important.
Yeah. So how about I give you a little origin story? So, I mean, everyone's got a reason why they leave clinical care, right? I've been an OT for 27 years. So I love home care. I've done home health. I did home health for 13 years, probably. It's my favorite. Real life, real stuff. I was a big MacGyver fan when I was a kid. So I don't know if you guys remember, but like, you know, maybe 7 or 8
You
years
just
ago,
became one of
probably.
my favorite, because I'll always tell people, like when I was teaching in grad school, I was like, so what we're learning here is how to become MacGyver. And half the time my students were too young to even like know what I was referencing. So anyway, sorry.
It's too,
Continue.
but they're missing out. They're missing out. And actually, I've made my kids watch it because it's so cool. It's still so cool. I mean, like, how does that guy make like I don't know, this out of this? Like, what? Under pressure. It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah, I reference it a lot in my book. But yeah, like, you know, I love that problem solving stuff in the home. You know, there's no big blue button to call in resources. I mean, you're the resource. You're figuring it out.
Absolutely.
It was super fun. And you get a chance to really get to know your patients really well. I mean, I love that. Like, you're watching how they progress and how everything goes. But, you know, like, under all of these healthcare pressures, you know, agencies still have to make money. And when Medicare started saying, hey, look, we pay for arm exercises. We don't pay for you to look on Amazon to help them find the products that they need or help you schedule a contractor to figure out where these things go, right? This was a problem to me. And, you know, I saw this huge divide also that was happening between hospital and home. So as the home care therapist, I get in there and, the starter care, they've been home for 7 days. They're thinking I'm coming to give them a shower. And I'm saying, I'm so sorry, but I have like 12 pages of a checklist email or a eval that I've got to complete. I can't do that. You can't, but we are people and we can't just leave them hanging. So what would happen is that I would end up closing my computer, helping them do the shower, teaching them the things, and then doing all that paperwork at the end of the day. So you can envision, now you're doing twice as much work. And I was just on a road to burnout. I was like, this is just craziness, because part of the reason that started was because you can't have part A and part B. So meaning that you can't be in the hospital and have somebody come to the house first to check, get all the stuff ready, prep everything so there isn't this ridiculous emergency there. So, that's where I saw the gap, and I said, okay, like, this is the resource people need. So I started my business with, reaching out to the case managers that I already knew and said, listen, like, if you have people, especially these ones that are traumatic, like the brain injuries, the spinal cords, the strokes, these are people who 1 minute they were fine and then the next minute they weren't. So that environment is not going to match what that person needs at that moment. So they would call me and say, look, like, we've got this person, they're getting ready for discharge. You've got 2-3 week lead time. Go to the house, like, go with the family, do an assessment and see, like, what do they need? And when people give me that much lead time, we can talk about like an intentional plan. So let's take that pool of money and we'll put it to the best efficient use possible. So buying something nice, having time and space to decide, I want something beautiful, or we can't afford this one, but we can afford this little bit of jewelry, and time to schedule that contractor. So, that is the origin story of my business. But, as all of us know, the need is so great. I mean, so great. I could probably see 5 people every single day and still not even make a dent in what people needed. So I recognized that really early, and I was like, okay, how do you reach more people? You go maybe through corporate stuff. So I was looking at a lot of these solutions, and I realized, okay, I have a lot of skills as an OT to help people understand what are those mindset challenges, environmental challenges that need to be solved that don't have a current solution. So I mentor for the Age Tech Collaborative. AARP Age Tech Collaborative is an ecosystem of startups and different people that can test beds, things where we can try to work together in order to accelerate solutions that can actually work and make an impact. So that is kind of where I started with that, and really understanding, okay, people are wanting to build solutions for older adults, but they don't know what the problem is. So if I can support these companies who are really wanting to do the right thing, then maybe that is a way to scale everything. So, but again, like, I always came back to the idea that the problem is money. The problem is that people don't know that they need to save. So by the time that they're 60, 70, they don't have the resources already figured out for that situation, right? So great that you have these solutions, but if you don't have the income or resources to buy those solutions, you're kind of out of luck. So that kind of led me to the next part of why I wrote my book, which is trying to scale. Like, impact at scale is only possible with education, with knowledge, with advocacy. So I basically started writing my book about a year ago, and my intent was to say, look, if somebody is not in my geographic area and they need access to the information that's in my brain, how can I download everything from my brain and put it into a format that is easy to read, that offers like DIY solutions? Things don't have to be about money. They can be about moving that furniture over here, or recycling this, or borrowing that, but they just need to know what to borrow, or what's the problem that I see that you need to try to solve in a way that is either inexpensive or something that needs to be professionally done. So my book is really set up like that, as a guidebook, as a really holistic guidebook, not just for aging in place, but truly what I'm trying to do is change mindsets around healthy aging and the financial benefits of that, because that's something we don't talk nearly enough about. We do not talk about the money piece. People are uncomfortable about that. But in my opinion, that's outrageous, because when you stop working at 65, you're not bringing in any more money. That money is fixed of what you have. So if you haven't figured out what you need, you're not going to be able to afford those things. So my big thing is, look, people need to be thinking about putting in intentional thought every time they do a remodel when you buy your first house, because that way you spread out the cost, you use it for, the environmental functional reasons, which we benefit from, right? As young moms with strollers, with wheelchairs, your grandmother visiting or whatever, right? Everybody benefits during this time. And then by the time that you do retire, everything will have been done and you have this good, beautiful space that works, right? Mm-hmm. So I really, my rationale really was about not only providing my assessment, basically word for word, what would I see, what would I say, what would I recommend, but on a bigger scale, changing mindsets about aging, like the stigma of grab bars and the talking about the money thing and the reality that not everybody's built to be a caregiver. And if people are expecting that their husband of 25 years or 50 years is going to be a 24/7 caregiver, that's unrealistic, because that's a straight road to burnout as well. So I think having a guide, a framework to look through and make sure that you're checking all those important boxes, that's the reason why I wrote it, just to give somebody a starting point. And all the solutions, honestly, I already knew that probably by the time the book came out, or even in 5 years, probably lots of the products will be, I don't know, obsolete or whatever. But the point of the book was to, provide that base and say, okay, here is how I want you to think. I'm going to teach you how to do this. Now you plug in the parts that work for you, that's personalized to you.
So I want to kind of dig down into this greater theme of being intentional. Intentionality. Is that a word? I don't know.
It is.
If I made it up,
I'm sure it is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Pat on the back, Amelia. But kind of digging down into that theme, because I think you're absolutely right. Being forward thinking, being intentional about how we're moving through our lives, not just as we're approaching retirement or after we're retired, but really the whole time, and thinking about how we're going to move through this world and how our environment is going to continue to affect us. I think as occupational therapists who have been doing this for a long time, that's a pretty easy thing for us to do. But for a lot of people, as we were talking about earlier, and the scary things that we've seen, it's not necessarily that easy, even when they're trying to be intentional. So what are some tips that you have for people to really, obviously there's lots in the book, I'm sure, but what are some tips that you have for people to be intentional as they're thinking about their lives, the things that they want to do, and the place that they're living when they're doing it?
Yeah, I'm going to start first by saying it's really hard to imagine who you're going to be 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from
Impossible.
now. I think that happens a lot. When I was in home care, was that people would say, I'd say, what's your plan? I'm going to stay here. I'm going to age in place. I'm like, great, but what's your plan? What are you planning to do in order to do that? Well, they're expecting that they're going to be the same person that they are, and they just keep living their life and time just rolls on. And so they're not really thinking, oh, I have a family history of X, Y, and Z, and this could be something that I might need to consider more of. The stairs that I have tripped on occasionally could be a problem later on. So I think the way that I try to say people can be more intentional is through practice and frequency. So if you are that 20-year-old that you are going through the house and you just pause for a half second and just think, the walls are down right now. What else could I do? What could I do right now that would promote a future me in this house if I stay in this house? And if you don't stay in this house, it's fine, because right now, less than 5% of all the housing stock in the US is even mobility friendly, let alone wheelchair accessible. Wheelchair accessible, it's under 1%. Yeah. So whatever you're doing, whatever changes you make as a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, and you don't stay in that house, you sell it, you're doing your social good by putting a house out there for somebody else who maybe didn't have that vision beforehand and planned ahead. But to go back to that, really, I really think that the more aware, first of all, you have to have the awareness of it. Okay, I'm aware that I need to make plans for later on, that it will save me money long-term, it saves me hassle, and it helps my community. But then every 5-10 years that you are changing now the pink bathroom or the avocado toilet, or all of these things, right? When you're 20, you can't afford this beautiful space. You buy a fixer-upper, which is even better because then it gives you that opportunity to dream and think intentionally about those things. And what I always say is that you don't have to put them in. But if you even just pause for just a second and think and do a little research about like, well, what would I do? What could I do to bring this space closer to a space that would support me later on, or support my parents if they needed it, support my kid if they broke their leg skiing. You don't have to be old to need mobility devices. You don't have to be, you don't have to live in the house to benefit from, like level spaces. It's just visitability. That's universal design, in like embracing everybody and saying, hey, like my house is open to everyone, every style, every user. So yeah. So I think thinking about this every single time that you do each room, it really helps to figure out what you want later on. And I will say, we don't always know what we want right off the bat, right? I mean, don't you have lots of clothes in your closet that you thought would look great and you never wear? Well, I mean, I think it's the same with home modification. There are tons of times that I have been to people's houses who said, I saw that commercial for a walk-in tub and I thought it'd be so perfect. So I put in this $10,000 tub and I hate it, right? Like I did not think this through, that I would have to wait till the water drains before I can leave the tub. So I'm going to be cold and I don't like that. And I didn't think it through. I said tub. So I was thinking relaxing. I didn't really think it through that I'm really kind of sitting in a chair. So what I'm trying to get at is that, when you think about it and maybe you implement one or two that you think, but you have an opportunity to change that. Like you might change your mind and decide, ooh, that was not a good idea. So my next one, 20 years from now, I'm going to do something a little different. So I feel like it should be like an integral part of a person. And not necessarily I have to carve out time to be intentional. Like, let's try to just be that all the time.
Yeah, I think that's like such a good point. And then in addition, like you talked about the money piece of it. So, right. So we don't talk about the money piece. People don't save, that's true. But also people expect that if their health changes, that their health insurance will cover what they need in order to live a good life or get back to health or however that feels for them. And don't realize that basically none of this is covered by insurance. And so now you're really in the hole because you don't have savings, and also you expected that somebody else was going to cover it. And so when we're thinking about like being intentional as a younger person maybe, or before you actually require a change, I think one of the big things when it comes to home modifications is people think about, okay, I have this change I want to make to my bathroom, or maybe there was a leak and now I have to like replace the ceiling or something. I want to put this back together in the most cost-effective way possible. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel about the actual cost? Like how big a difference is it to put in a rocker light switch instead of a flip up one, or lever doorknobs instead of round one, or like these little changes that make universal design principles work in a place's home? Like, is it actually more expensive if you're gonna do it anyway?
No, not at all. I want you to think for a second about like a lot of the things that used to be for disabled that we routinely use all the time now. I mean, I never watch TV anymore without closed captions. I mean, why would I? It's like so much easier. I have more sensory input from my eyes, from my ears. Like it just makes it easier for me to understand, but that wasn't what it was created for.
That's true.
Right. But now it's ubiquitous. Curb cuts, lots of like the OXO grip things. They were all for arthritis, but they're just good for everybody. Right. Mm-hmm. So my point being that like when there are good ideas, they become ubiquitous, which drops the price down. So they don't become expensive. So if you go to Lowe's right now and you look to see like, do I want a round handle or a lever handle? I'm going to bet they're probably pretty similar in price. And statistically, what I have heard is that when you plan these things in the front end, if you're building custom from the front end and already, I'm blocking the walls, I'm making wider doors, I'm doing all these things, the addition of cost is only 1%. Mm-hmm. Now, the question though is, why don't builders, especially because I live in Florida, why don't builders integrate this? And luckily for the audience, I have an answer for this because my father-in-law was a builder. He was a custom builder, and my husband's family comes from like 3 generations of like developing subdivisions. And so when I asked him that, I said, listen, I've been on several calls now with builders in town, and they are literally still building 27-inch doors in which is really small normally. Like, look, generous is going to be 36, but between the bedroom, master bedroom, and the bathroom, which is outrageous, right? And even worse, I'll tell you, this is like the thing that drives me crazy, because I really try to focus on the efficient use of money. They say to me, well, look, like I said, look, like we can't have that. We already know she's in a wheelchair. I mean, I need you to just don't do it then. Leave everything out, because I'm going to be replacing the sink. She can't get under that sink currently, but they can't do that. And my father-in-law told me that the reason is because when builders, generally, when you're not a custom builder, when you're like kind of in that middle, which tend to be the 500,000 to $1 million in that zone, those houses have maybe 3 or 4 design choices that you can pick from. Those have already been vetted by an architect and said, okay, we approve that these are all the things that are going to happen, and they can't be changed. So, and the permits, the way the permits work, they need to, the inspector has to come in and see that the sink has been put in, that the door has been put in as such. Like what you told them you were going to do at the beginning of that project is what they have to check you off of. And so the saddest thing to me is that in that situation with a woman in a wheelchair who had been in a wheelchair for several years already, and they were buying into like a 55 plus community with a 27-inch door, we had to let them build it, put everything in, and then rip it up. So now they're, So, and when you rip things up, things are not perfect. The floor doesn't match anymore, right? Because now you're trying to patch, because when you make it wider, now you have to fill in that gap. It's different if you're going to make it smaller. But if you make it wider, now nothing matches in there. And now you're paying for labor to remove what people did before. So my point being that it's frustrating, and that also I have compassion for builders, because from my father-in-law, I know that the margin is really small, and they are also taking a big risk, because when they build from scratch, they only know what the economic environment is at that moment. They don't know what it's going to be a year from now. What are lumber prices going to be? What are labor costs going to be? What is concrete going to cost them? So they don't always make a profit. And so even though it's easy for me as a non-builder to say, hey, look, buddy, it's 1%. Come on, like let's do our social responsibility and do right by everybody else, they are under economic strain as well. So that is what I've been told. If you are able to afford million plus houses in the custom zone, do whatever you want, right? That is the opportunity. But again, we're back to the money thing. How many people can afford to do that? It's not feasible. That's not impact at scale. That is working with people who have the resources. And that's not what I want. My book is literally dedicated to caregivers, because I want equal access for everybody to be able to do the things that they can do to take care of their loved ones. And that it doesn't involve having to hire expensive, consultants of any kind. Like my vision is truly that this is available at the library. Go to the library. Don't spend like $21.99. Go to the library and read it. And it's been wonderful because, even in Jacksonville already, like they've already picked it up at the library here. So,
nice.
People can go and do that. Yeah. And you can go, every library has a thing where you can recommend books to add to their collection. And so, if you want it in there, you just fill out the form, and they will, the more requests that they see, the more likely that they'll do it. And unfortunately, they also look at Amazon reviews, which I discovered that people buy reviews. So I'm very conflicted about that part of it, because while I want it to be accessible to everybody, I feel like that's trading in, my values and for something to get it in the right hand. So I just have to hope that, organically, that it's something that will spread enough that everybody will have access to it.
Yeah, it's a really tricky game to know, I think, as a consumer, what's authentic and what's not anymore out there. And I think that makes it even trickier for people like yourself who are really trying to put truly good, reliable, helpful information out into the world as a real expert. Because how do people know the difference between you and someone else, right? And of course, that's one of the reasons that, Brandy and I do the CareLab podcast is so we can help to highlight these things and get good education out there and help people find really reliable sources of information or products or, or education, whatever the case may be. I wanted to redirect a little bit back to, talking about this idea, like, a 27-inch doorway, which is for almost anyone in any wheelchair is not really going to be a functional width, not to mention where the door is located or where the sink is located or where the toilet is. Like sometimes we think only about that door.
For sure.
Yeah, we think only about the width of the door, but we don't think about all of the other maneuverability around that. And I'm not trying to go down super deep into weeds. My point is that one of the things that I have always thought and worked towards is that it would be really, really great if clinicians like occupational therapists became part of the building process from the beginning, like having us as advisors when codes are being written. If we want to talk about accessibility, like there should be an occupational therapist somewhere on that council or on that board, right? When we're building 55 plus communities or communities that are specifically like someone's buying in a 55 plus community or they're buying into an independent living community, their assumption is going to be that someone has designed it to be accessible for people as they age. And unfortunately, most of the time in my own experience, that's not actually the case. Things are designed to be beautiful, but often not designed to be accessible. And so how do you feel about getting OTs earlier into this process where we can really use our expertise from the beginning? And then two, like, how do we do that? How do we as individual OTs go out there and do that?
Okay, so I have a couple thoughts for you. One, there are OTs that are on accessibility councils right now that have been invited. Why are they invited? Because there's enough, knowledge that you need that. Now, is that a paid position? No, it's not. It is, right? So ultimately with, in business, having your own business, we all understand that when you get started, we do a lot of things for free, right? Because we need to be able to prove our value. And that is currently where we're at, I think, in the accessibility standards space, which is we've been invited to the table, luckily because of other maybe loud OTs that have been friends with them and said, hey, like, by the way, like, don't forget, I can do this. I have knowledge in this. I'm an expert in this area. And then, for the care building side, that is a very, very tricky thing. I think that when I first started my business, that I assumed that, of course, why wouldn't they want me there? I mean, I'm an expert in the home. I know how people work. But what I encountered was a big, giant brick wall. And over the years, I've gotten to understand why that is. And it's because of process. It's that when senior living, let's say, is being bid on, being bid on by several different companies to build it. And building that includes interior design. It includes all the design pieces in it. It's usually one big lump. It's like nobody wants to have to source all these little pieces. They want to pay one person who's a design firm maybe, who's going to take care of all of those pieces. And if they don't already know about OT or want to add OT to the cost of the project, which may stop them from getting the project, that is one of those things that ends up happening. Because if they don't see the value in what we can do differently than what they're already doing, then we're just a cost. So that's why, my big thing right now to drive OT adoption is really awareness. People don't know what we can do until we educate them. And OTs need to be telling people all the time, what is it that you do? How do you do it differently? And that's how you're seeing people right now in non-traditional settings, right? They didn't answer a post for looking for an OT in an architect firm. They had a friend who was an architect, and because they knew each other and they had a conversation about it, and they said, hey, this guy's got some value. I think we should give him a try. And you know what? When you give him a try, then it opens the door, and then it opens the door for other people. And I'll tell you, that's exactly how I ended up building caregiving robotics with Toyota Research Institute. They didn't know what an OT was. They might have sort of been around this, but that happened super organically. They thought what they needed was input about how a person goes sit to stand. And somebody I knew said, hey, well, I know an OT that's really, working in the home and could definitely answer those questions for you. Great. So I did a meeting with them, and I offered them my ideas and suggestions for 2 hours. And I was like, great, like I did my part, right? I helped the next generation of like development of a product that could eventually help people. And 3 months later, I heard back, and they said, listen, we learned so much from you in 2 hours that we didn't learn for 6 months of interviewing all these other people. Would you consider coming to do a talk for our engineers and teach them more about this kind of thing, right? So I look at this as very much like a set of stairs. Like I kind of like passed one hurdle, and I got people curious enough to call me back and say, hey, could you do another one? And then when I was at that event, I said, hey, like if you want to, I'm happy to go to the on the motion capture floor where they are actually looking at everything. Like, let me show you what I can do. Not just talk about it. Let me show you how I would move and how I would do this. And that was what led to me contracting with them. Right. So like they first had to be aware that OT existed that could help. Then I had to talk to them and see that they could see the value. And then I had to show them like what that looks like for them to say, yeah, okay, great, we're in for a contract, right? And we published our paper in Applied Sciences in January this year. It's all about, caregiving robotics and how like our envisionment of these things can push the next generation of roboticists to think about how to design and why they need that. Why do they need these skills for those ADLs? And which, of course, is our area of expertise.
Right. That makes total sense. It feels like dealing with home modifications from a process level can be overwhelming because it's starting so much further before us, especially if you're a family caregiver who's moved into a house 20 years ago and you're in the house that you're in, especially these days where it's kind of ridiculous to try to sell a house and buy a new house that's going to cost you more money and give you less space and have a higher interest rate. And so, but the thing I want to highlight from what you said is that it really starts with awareness, right? Whether you're a family caregiver, just being aware, or you just not even a caregiver, but just like being aware of that, like there are ways to make things easier for you now and in the future. And let's stop to think about it. And then if you're a clinician, if you're an occupational therapist especially, like we need to be more visible. And that way people can be made aware that we're the people that deal with this and that we should be getting embedded higher up the ladder, earlier in the process, so that when it comes to the codes, why we still are building 27-inch wide bathroom doorways, which if you haven't thought about it, your bathroom is probably that wide. And if you haven't done nothing about it, it probably is that size. Because even though the builders are following the codes or following what the plan was, the plan didn't have to start that way, right? Like if somebody knows a reason why it shouldn't be. And so even if it feels like ineffective, it's not, because the more times people hear something, the better it is. Yeah. If you move into a 55 plus community and you're like, hey, how come this isn't like why is there still a step on this walk-in shower? How come there's no grab bars in here? And you like at least elevate that, it brings it to people's attention. And maybe they change it for you, but maybe they also think about that for the next building they're about to build, right? You just
We absolutely have to be advocates. I think the problem so far has been, OTs are so nice and we want to play nicely and we want to say, here, please go ahead. You go do this. And instead, what we need to be doing is truly being a little bit more like aggressive and saying, I don't like the word aggressive, but, just
assertive.
Standing out.
We need to be assertive. Yeah.
Yeah. We need to be assertive and we need to say, hey, I could do this. And let me show you how we can do these parts in there. And, I think, Brandy, you have a really good point. And that was something that I really realized early on. And that's how I started working with AARP. I have a webinar that we did 2022, maybe, that was about conversations around finance and housing and everything. And part of the reason I started doing that was because I really believe in the idea of critical mass, that you have to empower the person. So think about like what I just said about the builders. Builders are on a tight profit margin. But if they are seeing people marching in there going, hey, like I want to be able to age in place. And I heard these crazy chicks talking about like wider doorways and this and that or whatever. Like, I don't care how you got the message, but like, this is what I want. And you get more people saying, this is what I want. Exactly. Guess what the builder's going to do? right? And these people are saying, look, like I'm voting with where I'm going to build, and I'm okay with paying 1% extra if I get the things that I need on the front end instead of having to change everything for a lot more money later where it looks terrible. So advocacy to me is really empowering homeowners to know what to expect from their contractors, to take an active role in this and not a passive one. Don't call up, 1-800-GRAB-BAR and have this guy come over to tell you that you need this grab bar and you need it here and you need it like right here. I mean, like he may not know and he may be guessing. And
just sells grab bars.
And this is such a difficult situation because it's a lot like when you go to your mechanic. Because how do you know? I don't know anything about cars. If he tells me that the engine needs like a $1,500 repair, I have nothing. Nothing. Yeah, I have to trust, right? And that was a part of my business that I did early on, which is I would be the patient's advocate. And I would say, listen, think of me like your lawyer. I would sit on calls with builders and with other contractors who would say, look, like, yeah, we can't recycle any of those toilets, even though you just bought them 6 months ago. And then we get off the call and I'm like, yeah, that's totally not true. Like you can, that's a $55 wax ring. And the reason he's saying that is because he doesn't want to be responsible for taking it out, potentially breaking it, or having to store it for 4 to 6 weeks and not have one of his guys break it or chip it and then have to add that expense to it. So as long as people understood the reasons behind it, they felt better, because I refuse to believe that people want to gouge just for the sake of gouging. I mean, if they're saying something like that, there's probably there's a reason behind it. That's not maybe something that they always want to tell you. And you know what? That is exactly the home health problem, isn't it? I mean, what, like I need more visits. Yes, I agree. You need more visits, but like, I can't say that because the agency also needs to like break even at 20 visits. So I'm stuck in between like what the story that I'm telling and what's actually happening in between. So I think that I see my role in that is as educating homeowners about what the realities are so they can also have compassion for like what people are telling you. So let's not be fighting and divisive and like, you're trying to rip me off and you're trying to do this. I'm like, no, people are just trying to make a living. But there are outside factors that are outside of their control to be able to, do the things that they might want to do. It just is.
Well, Carol, thank you so much for being on today. Before we wrap up, would you please tell everyone where can they find your book? And where can they find you? I know you have a new podcast too.
I do. And that is up there with my impact at scale goal, which is I wanted people to have access to that information. And I love MedBridge for, having open access for the podcast called Innovative Aging. And it's where I bring on founders of good product ideas, but not to discuss necessarily, it's not a marketing podcast. It's truly that I want to discuss a certain pain point that people are having in the home and bring on one potential solution. And let's talk about all those different options. So Innovative Aging is available on all podcast platforms, open access, so anybody can listen to it. My book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, which is if you want to support independent booksellers, that's where you would go to do that. It's also on my website, which is evolvinghomes.com.
Carol, thank you so much for being on CareLab today. We really enjoyed the conversation. I think we could talk probably forever about all of these things. Sure. Listener, if you made it to the end of this episode, please take a moment to leave a comment, to like, subscribe, share this with someone who you think could benefit from it. That's the best way that we can get out the word about the type of information that we're trying to share with people here at CareLab and help more people just like you. Until next time, we'll see you right back here on CareLab. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.